Hello, everyone. We're here at the Hub 17, and the name of my podcast is Victory and Vanity, and I am Vanity LaPree. Today, I have here with me a New York City entrepreneur that has 4 different businesses by the name of Wall Ball World, U.S. Wall Ball Association, The Culture Pivot, and the Cornerstone Daycare located in Brooklyn.
Awesome.
And we also talking, might as well put it out there, 6-figure income coming in with those 4 different businesses. And here she is, without further ado, Jasmine Ray. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. So I have a question for you first. Who is Jasmine Ray?
Oh my goodness. I am first and foremost a mother. I have a 10-year-old son named Jaden. A sister. I have had 2 brothers. I have one now, Jason. A daughter. A business owner, an athlete. Yeah, that pretty much sums me up. And a lefty, a Pisces, and an introvert. There you go.
Oh, nice. So an introvert.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find that quite interesting with you having different businesses and you have to be outgoing and be around a lot of people. So how is it possible to even be an introvert?
So I had to learn how to speak in public. I had to learn how to be boisterous, an extrovert. You know, it's a skill. It's not something that comes natural to me. And I learned it in college when I was in my business class.
Okay.
My professor, he took a liking to me. And he saw some potential, but he was like, you just got to break out of your shell. So he used to record me and then make me give speeches in front of the class. And then he would make me come at 6 o'clock in the morning, even though class started at 8, to watch myself back. And then we used to make improvements. And and today it feels natural, but, you'll catch me. If there's a room full of people, I'll be the quietest one there.
Oh, wow. Wow. What a dedicated teacher. Shout out to your teacher, by the way.
His name was George Stern, and that was at CSI.
Nice. All right. So, Jasmine, how was your upbringing, like growing up? Like, explain, what did that look like and where did you grow up?
I grew up, so the first 12 years of my life, I grew up in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And then when my parents divorced, my father moved to North Carolina. My mother moved to Staten Island. So I was shuffled back and forth between North Carolina and Staten Island. But my mom is Puerto Rican and Filipino. My dad is Black.
Nice.
And it's so interesting. My parents, I find them so interesting because they are not the typical, and I hate to say stuff like that, but like my dad listens to rock music as a Black man, like he was into Tom Petty and Steely Dan, Fleetwood Mac, if any of those groups ring a bell to you. And then my mother listened to Barbara Streisand, like she wasn't like the typical Puerto Rican in the house. We never really had Spanish music playing too much, but and I consider my mom like an intellectual, can answer every question in Jeopardy. Yep. My dad's an athlete. He plays tennis. He's incredible to this day. He's like 62 and still can beat a 30-year-old. Amazing athlete.
Nice.
My mom is very much a disciplinary, could be militant at times, but in a good way. Look where you are now, though. Yeah. You know what? At the time, I didn't appreciate it. Today, I definitely do. But yeah, mixed background. My parents were dope, very different. Literally black and white. Like, my dad is, like I said, he listens to rock music. My dad is cool, real laid back, quiet. My mom is the opposite. She's very aggressive, very loud, very opinionated. So they're very different. But I feel like I got the best of both worlds.
Nice. So speaking of, like you mentioned about your mom being militant and she was like a really like disciplinarian, it worked out because now you have 4 different businesses. Now, can you talk about those 4 different businesses and what you desire for people to, like, what do you want people to gain from your businesses? Because you have 4, so if you could elaborate. I know one of them is the wall ball world, which means a lot to you.
Absolutely.
You're turning the street sport handball that a lot of us consider it here in New York, and you want to make that into an actual, like,
professional game.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. And I found that interesting. I was watching some of your videos and I was like, this girl's hopping.
Well, thank you. Wall ball's a big deal to me. So, I mean, how that played a role, how my mom played a role in sort of me building my businesses out. It's interesting how, you know, they say hindsight 20/20 vision, you know. So, and looking back, I realized that she played a big role. And I don't even think that she knows she played a big role, but a big part of why I was so aggressive in starting my very first business was because I was fired from my job when I was 6 months pregnant with my son. And I had to go on welfare. And I will never forget that so we live on Targhee. Well, she lives on Targhee. And, you know, the welfare office is on Bay Street. I had never been there, never knew it was there, never seen it, drove by it a million times, didn't know it was there. And when I was fired from my job, I had to go on welfare. And welfare is almost like very taboo in my family. Like, you know, you don't go on welfare, you work for yours, you know. So I said, Ma, come with me to the welfare office. I'll never forget that. She was like, nope, you got yourself into this, get yourself out of it. And it was such like a... oh my God, like
an aha moment.
Yeah, and you know what? If I had the support, and I'm not even saying this in a bad way, but if I had, you know, been coddled or, you know, had my hand held through the process, I don't know that I would have came out on the other side the way that I did, right? So I remember going to the welfare office, crying hysterically. I was 6 months pregnant. It's funny, I'm pregnant now. I'm telling the story with my daughter.
The irony of it.
Yeah, it's so ironic. 10 years later. But I remember like crying hysterically in the welfare office. And it was so funny because they definitely told me like the waiting time is 3 hours. But because I was so hysterical and I was 6 months pregnant, they were like, come on, we'll take you. So I went on welfare for 5 months. It might have even been less than that because it was like November to February, I think. And my son was born in December.
Okay.
And at the time, I just had no direction. I didn't know where I was going to go. You know, I was just fired. I didn't really have any hard skills. I had a lot of soft skills. Meaning like I didn't have any certifications. I didn't have my degree at the time, you know. So it was like, well, what am I going to do with my life? Baby's coming. I'm broke. I have a car. I have bills. I have an apartment. But I had no way of paying for these things, didn't have a savings account. So all that was just a big wake-up call and like, okay, I got to shift. I have to pivot in how I approach my life because I can't be caught up in this situation again.
Absolutely.
So it was just a really hard, I had to move back in with my mom, right? And because she was who she was, I was honestly really embarrassed to be lazy. I was embarrassed to sleep late. I was embarrassed to be around the house and not feel like I wasn't doing anything. So I literally would spend every waking moment researching, developing an idea. I mean, if she ever saw me sitting at the kitchen table, I was on my laptop working, you know. I would still wake up. I wake up 3, 4, 5 o'clock. So even to, you know, when I lived with her, to this day, I still wake up at that time. But when I lived with her, I make sure I was up before the sun. You know, I was doing something. I was working out or I was working on my computer. But there was no such thing as lounging around and things like that. So I think that's a big deal because if your parents enable you to do those things, enable you to lounge around and be lazy and things like that, you know, I mean, you see the outcome of that, right? But I had the opposite. It was like, and she wasn't the type to ever really say anything to me, but because of the way I was raised, I guess I already had like that fear of like.
You didn't want to disappoint her.
I didn't want to.
I would say,
you know
right?
what? I didn't want to be. No, you know what? It was more of like a fear of mediocrity. Like, I didn't want to be mediocre because she had high standards for herself. And, you know, sometimes you just feel like you always want to exceed your parents' expectations. So it wasn't like I wasn't really trying to. I wasn't thinking like she's going to be disappointed. I was thinking like, no, you raised me to be a certain way and I'm going to be that and more. So it was more like like, I'll show you type of thing, you know? So,
like, don't sleep on me, Mom.
Yeah, no. And you know what? She actually told me like recently that, you know, she actually said online, and I read it in a comment, that she was like, yeah, she used to, the only time she watched TV in my house, if she was watching The Prophet or she was watching Shark Tank. Like, it was never like, you know, mindless TV or
not like these
that.
reality shows.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't think she was paying attention to that stuff. And,
wow.
and she was telling me how I was when I was living with her, and it was true. Like, I was either watching the Prophet, I was watching Shark Tank, I was taking notes. I wasn't sitting there just watching TV, you know, and I was very aggressive and trying to get back on my feet. So I started my first business, which turned out to be the wrong business that I wanted to start. I started Wall Ball World LLC. And that was because my brother had passed away the year before, in 2009, and in a car accident right on Father Capodanno by the beach. Wow. He was driving, and he wasn't supposed to be driving. He was 16. And he hit a pole, and it was raining, and so, you know, that was, you know, sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes they're fatal mistakes, you know?
Yes, this is true.
Yeah, so handball, we used to go down the block to Stapleton, and Stapleton Playground, we used to play handball against each other. You know, I bet you $10, I bet you, you know, you do the dishes, whatever, I bet you got to run a mile if I win, things like that. Like, my family's very athletic, so we're all super competitive. And me and my brother was always that. You know, he was in the house, I was around, so we used to go down the block and play handball. So when he passed away, I really was thinking that I wanted to do something for his demographic, you know, like... And
to honor him.
Yeah, so
honor his life.
I absolutely wanted to honor him. And I was like, what better way to honor him than to give kids in his age group something productive to do, right? Because why did he want to drive? You know, what, you know, I just was like, there's got to be more. And there's got to be more available for these kids that are, you know, just, you know, the decision making sometimes like boggles my mind, you know, and so, and not just him, but, you know, in general, like, why do kids want to pick up a gun? Why do kids get into fights? Why do they do what they do? As you know, so, but then you got to think about it. And growing up, like, we had access to recreation. We had Cromwell. We had, you know, they didn't have that. Cromwell sank in the water, you know, and what's happened the last 10 years? Crime went up. Right? So it's like, what do we do for these kids in the meantime? So it was important for me to start a youth group on Staten Island. But at the time, I started an LLC, and what I really needed was a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. So I started it. I worked on it for a year until I come to figure out, you know, people kept telling me, you can't raise money under an LLC. And I was like, okay. So I went back to the drawing board, and I filed for my second company, which was a 501c3, and it took a year to get approved because you know, federal tax code 501c3 just means tax exempt. So that's a really big deal. You know, you can get in big trouble for mismanaging funds. But I got the 501c3 and I started raising money. And I had a handball tournament and it was highly successful. And
I seen the video.
Yeah, it was and I really was like, it was mind boggling to me because I played in Mahoney Park. You know, I went to Curtis. So I used to go down the block to Mahoney. I used to play handball. People know me from being a handball girl in Mahoney or playing in Stapleton, playing at the Berries. So it was interesting how I thought I was just so small or narrow-minded at the time, thinking like I'll do something local, but it wound up being a lot bigger than what I thought it was. And the demographic of people who play were a lot bigger than I thought they were. And coming to find out, they play handball, which I call wall ball, in over 40 countries. And people take it really serious. There's tournaments, there's big prize money, things like that. So I wind up starting this organization, the United States Wall Ball Association. I wound up raising money. Then I wound up learning about government funding and different funding streams and foundations. So it took me about 3 years, really. It took me from 2010 all the way to like 2013, where I got my first big check. Okay. And I mean, it was like $40,000, but at the time it was like a lot of money for somebody who has a 2-year-old and lives with their mother.
And you were in your earlier 20s then too, right?
Yeah, I was 20. I had my son. I was 20. I actually was 27 when I had my son. So I'm
sure that check coming in the mail, you felt good about yourself.
Yeah, I was definitely in my 20s when I got that first check, and I was like, oh my God. But, you know, at the time, I would say disciplined enough not to just spend it wildly.
So you said you were disciplined enough, or you were not?
I was disciplined enough.
See, that's
not
important.
Not to say, you know what, this money, Some can go here, some can go there. I was just, you know what? How could I grow this? And I just put the money right back in. I did the right thing with it. And that was like the best decision I could have ever made in the first 5 years of Wall Ball, was always just reinvesting. I never pocketed anything that I didn't need. Like it was always pay your essentials and put everything back into the business. And then Red Bull wound up having a professional handball tournament. And I remember seeing the flyers and people were calling me like, did you know that Red Bull's doing handball? And I was like, what? So I went to the tournament. Big deal. And I went to the tournament. I kept pitching myself. I was like, listen, I have this organization. I can help you. Please give me a chance. So like year one, they gave me $1,500 to help them with outreach. They said, bring people to the table. We'll pay you $1,500. It wound up being a loss for me, but I just wanted the opportunity. So I took it. The next year, they gave me $3,500. They were like, we like what you did that year. So, you know, I made a couple of $1,000 because now that money went in my LLC, right? It didn't go in my nonprofit. So that was money that I could use for expenses, and anything left over, I could keep.
So you were good with money management early on.
Yeah. And you know what? I can't even say that was anything I was taught. I just have always... My mom has this joke that I should have been named Jasmine Ray, because she says you were born Jewish. She said your name should have been Ray because you are the cheapest person I know. You know,
Got
and
you.
like to this day, like I'm not fancy. You know, I don't do much other than the necessities. But that's because I'm always.
But that's wise though, and you know, honestly. Speaking of like the money management, after you mentioned about your businesses, this is still a part of your business, the culture pivot. I definitely want you to talk about the hard knock entrepreneurship masterclass. Yeah. Once you finish about the other businesses, you have to, and I will be in your class soon.
Oh, thank you.
Give me 2 weeks though.
A lot of people are not ready to hear what's in that course.
I'm okay with it. Hit me hard.
You know what? But that's part of the journey of, especially being an entrepreneur, is really hearing hard truths, things that you don't necessarily want to hear, things that you're not ready to hear, but you have to just kind of humble yourself and say, you know what, I have to trust that these people have my best interests at heart. They know what they're doing. And one of my mentors was my professor, you know, in college. Another one of my mentors was my attorney, you know, and the reason I wanted to do the culture pivot, and I'll get back to Wall Ball, but the reason I really wanted to do culture pivot is because the mentors that were so just pivotal, so important in my life, they were white men, you know? And I was like, wow, like I'm not being mentored. You know, it's like, you know.
That's interesting too.
Yeah. Right? And I'm not prejudiced. I'm mixed. So it's like, it is what it is. But I just, you know, I came from Sunset Park, then I moved to Stapleton. And so I really wasn't exposed to different cultures other than our own. And when I met my professor, he was just so hard on me. Like I would break down crying sometimes, and he'd be like, you better stop crying. You know, like, I mean, it was just tough love. And he taught me so much. But he saw, you know, the potential in me. And I think because I have a background in like martial arts and in sports,
we're going to get into that later too.
Yeah. You know, you got to be coachable, meaning you got to be ready to hear things you don't want to hear. And this man would say all types of things I didn't want to hear. You know, like, you're overweight. You don't like it? Do something about it. And I used to be like, oh, my God. You know, very tough.
Talk about the pressure on.
Yeah. So if you think about it, you know, my mom was like that. You know, my karate teachers were like that. My uncle who taught me martial arts was like that. And then, you know, my mentors were like that. So I kind of knew how to take constructive criticism and not take things personal and just say, okay, I just got to toughen up. You know,
speaking
of that, what I kept doing.
Remember months ago, I contacted you. I think it was.
I remember.
And you hit me with some hard truth.
I remember.
You with some hard truth, but I couldn't receive it at that moment.
Yeah.
But after the fact, I appreciate it. So I just wanted to.
I appreciate you saying that. I actually felt really bad because
it's all good.
My boyfriend was like, my fiance now is saying to me, "You gotta stop being so hard on people," and I was like, but I don't know how else to be. That's
I needed to hear it.
Me, you know?
I needed to hear it.
So back to Wall Ball, you know, so I worked with Red Bull for 2 years, and then they wind up firing a lot of their employees, but they still wanted to have this handball tournament, and they came back to me and said, you know, you're the only one that's really been involved in this handball tournament. Do you want to do it? And I was like, do the whole thing? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, well, what's the budget? $70,000. What? 70,000? So I went from like literally being on welfare, being broke, to making, then at the time, I think I was up to like 50 or 60 grand with the nonprofit a year. Then I had 70,000 from Red Bull. That's where things started to like kind of take off. And I was like, oh my God, this is something. And then people around the world were pulling me here and there, can you fly here? Can you come represent the US and things like that? So I started flying around the country, the world really. And then I started to think, okay, how do I grow this? I need a product. So I developed my own ball. I flew to China to manufacture it.
I seen that in your bio.
Yeah. I just, and then another opportunity fell on my lap. And that was my great-grandfather. He was a civil rights activist in Brooklyn. His name is Dr. Sandy Ray. Mm-hmm. And he founded Cornerstone Baptist Church. Well, he didn't let me not say that. It existed, but he rebuilt it. He rebuilt it. He built a new church. Then he built an education center. He built the first mental health clinic in the U.S. for African Americans. So he was a big deal, but he passed away before I was born, so I didn't know too much about him. But someone was shooting a documentary on wall ball, and they were asking me about my African American side. So I was like, well, let's go back to Brooklyn because that's where they're at. And I wound up going to the daycare center, and that he founded in 1968. Mm-hmm. And when I walked in, I had never walked in there before. They were like, you're a Ray? And I was like, yeah, my great-grandfather's Dr. Ray. And they were just like, oh, my God, we need so much help. We're closing down in 2 weeks. Your great-grandfather founded this in 1968. Like, it's been 50 years. We can't let this die. And I was just like, what? Like, I don't know anything about daycare. And then, long story short, the board of directors happened to be there on the day that I was there. And they were like, listen, do you have any experience? I was like, I don't know anything about daycare, but I know nonprofit because I've had my nonprofit at that time for like 6 years. Mm-hmm. And they were like, look, if there's anything you could do, I was like, well, I know politicians. So maybe I could get some agencies off your back. Maybe I could help you figure out your fundraising, things like that. I could take a look at your budget, your operations, your compliance, and see where it is that you're failing. And then, we could try to build it up together. And they were like, look, we have nobody here to assist you. We'd be willing to just hire you. And I was like, well, I'm not looking for a job. I appreciate it, but I'm not looking for a job. And they were like, we'll give you $50,000. And I was like, that sounds nice, but I'm still not looking for a job. And they were like, okay, we'll give you the daycare center. They said, we'll give you full. They were like, look, it's your family's legacy. If you could prove that you're really his great-granddaughter, we don't see why you shouldn't have it. So I brought them my birth certificate, and I was like, look. So my father's actually Sandy Ray the Third.
Oh, wow.
So they have the same name. So I was like, here's my dad. He's Sandy Ray the Third. And they were like, oh, there proves it. So I have been running the daycare center now for the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. The first year they paid me $50,000. Second year it was 70. Then it was 90. So, I still maintain all three businesses. And I was making 40, 50 from here, 70 from here, 90 from there. And, same thing. But let me not, because it's not all about the money. Of course. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of breakdowns the first year of dealing with the daycare center, which is Cornerstone Daycare Center. It was very tough to bring that daycare center back up to compliance. Mm-hmm. At the time, they had a $379,000 budget. Whoever was in charge at the time, completely mismanaging the money, very top heavy, the bulk of the money, especially in a nonprofit, is supposed to go towards programming. Mm-hmm. It's not supposed to go towards staffing. It's not supposed to go in your pockets. It's supposed to go towards programming.
You got some churches that, unfortunately, that do that.
You know how these churches are. So
listen, my grandfather was a pastor for 57 years. Yeah. And I'm gonna just say, sometimes you can't trust everyone that works around you.
I mean, I'm gonna tell you, maybe this comment is controversial, but I've been told, and I've actually witnessed it, the politics of the church are worse than politicians.
What?
Yeah, absolutely.
I could believe that.
They're worse. And you know what? The worst part is they go by a different set of rules. A lot of them go by what's called religious corporation rules. Completely different. The separation of church and state. So a lot of the time, they get away with a lot. Yeah. And there's no checks and balances. A lot of they're supposed to have deacons and trustees that are supposed to be like their board of directors per se, and
that are supposed to be doing the right thing. Like my grandfather, amazing. He had nonprofit organizations, everything as well, and very trustworthy. But sometimes you have certain people around you.
Yeah.
There, you know.
Yeah, and that was the case at Cornerstone. So it took me a long time to rebuild it. Mm-hmm. I could say I was very stressed out, lost a lot of hair that year. But today our budget is almost $1 million. So, it literally went from 20 kids to 40 kids to 50 kids to 60 kids. And then now I'm opening a second daycare center. So
look at God and hard work.
Yeah. So that's Wobble LLC, United States Wobble Association, Cornerstone Daycare Center.
You gave me a beautiful breakdown. Yeah, and then you mentioned the culture pivot as well. Of, you have the Hard Knock Entrepreneurship Masterclasses.
Yep.
But while we mentioned about Cornerstone Daycare, I want to ask you a question about your grandfather.
Sure.
So your grandfather, Dr. Sandy F. Ray, and I want to make sure, I'm going to look at my notes because I want to say it right.
Please, yeah.
So your grandfather presided over New York's Empire Missionary Baptist Convention.
Yes.
And
he was the president,
the late, great Martin Luther King Jr. said that your grandfather was one of the best orators in the nation.
Yeah, in the African American community, but in the nation, yeah.
Now, knowing that, Jasmine, I mean, how did that change the dynamic of you personally and professionally? Like, how did that motivate you in your career? Because, you couldn't half step after, the late, great Martin Luther King Jr. said that about your grandfather. You got to really keep it going. So did that encourage you, though, like knowing that about your grandfather?
Yeah. Someone said to me once, a great ancestor requires a great descendant. Yeah. And it was just like, chills up my arms, like, okay, I'm there.
Can say that one more time. You got to bless me with that one more time.
A great ancestor requires a great descendant. Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah. So you know what? Being at Cornerstone, for me, I'm telling you, it was more about honoring my great-grandfather's legacy than anything. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the challenge of a daycare center or the money. And I mean, sad to say, it wasn't even about the kids. It was, I need to carry this forward, and it's my responsibility. And that's how I felt. And even though I had been educated on who he was, I really didn't know the depth of like his contribution to the African American culture. I didn't know how big he was in Brooklyn until people would stop me in the street and say, give me stories, tell me stories about, he was a man of the people. He was so humble. Everybody loved him. When Cornerstone was at its peak, he would have 7,000 members, would have to have a service outside sometimes because too many people showed up and they didn't all fit in the sanctuary.
Wow, so he would have to have. He was.
Yeah, he was very powerful. And the reason why Martin Luther King Jr. knew him was because he actually went to Morehouse with Martin Luther King Sr. They were best friends. Yeah, and then Martin Luther King Jr. grew up thinking that that he was his uncle, so he used to call him Uncle Sandy.
Nice.
Yeah, and he didn't find out that it wasn't his uncle until right before he passed away. And my great grandfather, he was sort of like a mentor to him too. He would say that was one of his mentors. So my bloodline, my family's bloodline, helped mentor one of the greatest civil rights activists in our time, and I find that extraordinary. But yeah, how it affected me is it made me raise my standards even more. Mm-hmm. Like how could you not rise to the occasion after figuring out your pedigree, your bloodline? Like his blood definitely runs through my veins, and like I have to honor that.
The proof is in the pudding.
I take that very serious. Like as far as just having integrity and being, a woman or a person of the people, and and that's where the culture pivot comes from, right? Because fast forward to last year, COVID and just everything shifting to online. Mm-hmm. A lot of my business models were pretty much axed. I was having tournaments. You're talking about 300 people showing up to a tournament. I couldn't have those anymore, right? Because of social distancing mandates. And then the whole Red Bull was canceled. So there's one funding stream gone. Then I couldn't have the tournaments for the kids. 2 funding streams gone. And then the daycare center, Department of Education, lowered our capacity. And that's 3 that were hit. So I was like, okay, everything's going online. What the hell do I do? And I was like, you know what? People are always coming to me, specifically young females, saying, how'd you do this? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a course. And I had so much time on my hands because I wasn't doing wall ball, and I'm so used to being busy. So I was like, I'm going to write a course. So I wrote a course from scratch on what I felt like the lessons that I've learned that I could kind of pass down. And I shot it. And I shot it in my house. And then I built a website. And literally the name came to me at 3 a.m. one day. I was just sitting in my home office like, what am I going to call this? The culture pivot came to mind because I was like, this is exactly what needs to happen. Our culture needs to pivot right now, right? Many ways. Are you a writer, low key too? Yeah, absolutely. I can tell. Yeah, I used to be in the music industry. That's a whole nother life that I had. I got a record deal when I was 19 years old. Tommy Mottola wound up signing me to Universal Records, and I used to write all my own songs and everything like that. So definitely, I have a writer's background. And and I wrote my course. I shot it. I invested, and I launched it. And then at the time, my fiance, he's so big into health, and I was like, you know what? If I think about how our culture needs to pivot, it's not just business. It's not just being self-sufficient. It's also there's a huge health component that's missing, right? We're so used to the bacon, egg, and cheeses and Brothers Pizza and the Chinese restaurant, D&B Chinese over on Westerville. So I was like, these things go hand in hand. You can't be self-sufficient without your health. And you can't be successful in business without being mentally stable, right? So these things go real. So I was like, you know what, do you want to do this? And he was like, yeah, let's do it. So then we built it up together. There's a health component to it. There's a business component, entrepreneurship component to it. And we are just literally passing down anything and everything we know. Most of it is for free. I have the course. The course is $100 and something now, but I do videos and I do tutorials and I've done Zoom meetings and things like that. Just passing down information that I've learned because I want to see my community do better, and that's what the culture pivot is about.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, when you said the mental component of that too, like mental health. Now, I'm a person I've mentioned on my Facebook posts and Instagram. I personally deal with anxiety and depression. That's something that I'm, doing the best that I can to overcome. And like you said, it's about mental stability. What's have you dealt with mental health challenges, or do you have any words of encouragement for people that are dealing with mental health challenges? Because it's so prevalent and a lot of people are so ashamed because of the stigma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, and this is something I've actually never said out loud, or never said in an interview before. But when I want to say I was 17, I tried to kill myself. When I was like 17, I was in high school and I was just really lost, confused, didn't know and I literally slit my wrist when I was in high school. And my brother, I remember going to school. I mean, today I could, kind of like laugh about it, but I remember going to school because obviously I wasn't successful. And I wrapped up my wrist, and me and my brother was sitting at the lunch table, and the blood was gushing out through this like bandage that I put. And he was like, "What happened to you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that." And and then then the school gets involved, and then they got me and at the time I was in North Carolina with my dad, and they got me a therapist, and they were just like, "Why are you doing this?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just, so I wasn't mentally stable. I was really just lost and felt like I didn't have any, guidance or resources. My dad, he's amazing, but he was working 2 jobs full time, was gone in the morning and probably came home, when it was time for us to go to sleep. I just remember doing everything for me and my brother, cooking, and, it was a crash course in doing my own hair and figuring myself out, So
you probably felt very overwhelmed. And
super overwhelmed.
And then it goes back to when you don't have like the stability in your mind at that time, you know what I mean? Then it'll cause you to resort into something like that. I think a lot of people, when it comes to suicide, people do that because they don't want to feel the pain or they feel overwhelmed and they just don't know where to turn. So looking back at your 17-year-old self, what would you say to her when she did that?
You know what? I think that life kind of unfolds the way it's supposed to. I'm not even upset at the experience. I've never tried to do it again. You know, that was something that happened, and I mean, I wouldn't dream about killing myself today or any other day. And I've never felt like that since then. But again, you know, same thing happened. That happened, and then the school brought in a bunch of resources to try to get me, you know, back to feeling healthy again. And, you know, then I had a whole bunch of mentors around me then from the school, you know, therapists and people would come in, and a few of them I'm still in touch with to this day, 20 years later. But I needed people.
Absolutely.
I needed people, and I didn't have the resources. And that's why, for me, it's so important to have resources, you know, through Wall Ball, through the Culture Pivot. You know, the Culture Pivot is a resource. Wall Ball is a resource. Even, you know, the daycare center. I'm huge on providing services outside of just the DOE curriculum. You know, I have the kids gardening. I have the kids, they do piano lessons. They do a lot of things that I just wish that we had more of in our community. So I try to make sure that I provide those things to the kids. At least, you know, you try to impact where you can. And
Absolutely.
So, you know, my 60 kids, I try to give them everything that I wish I had. I used to play the piano by ear, but I always wish I had lessons. I was like, I give my kids piano lessons, you know? So gardening, we need to, you know, learn how to be more self-sufficient. I provide that to my kids. You know, they garden. They understand growing your own food and the importance of it, and, you know, the patience in watching something grow and being able to create something, you know, on your own, something that has life. It's tangible, you know? So
absolutely.
But that was a time in my life that, like, I never really speak about. I still have the scar, but I don't regret it. And it was probably exactly what I needed at the time. Maybe it was an outlet. You know, it was me screaming for help, and I got the help that I needed.
I was thinking that.
Thank God, because a lot of these kids don't get the help that they need, you know? And so this is where we have to step in and provide more social services and resources and things like that. But
the kids that are not getting the help that they need, that are dealing with, you know, mental health challenges, as well as adults as well. I mean, what is some good advice that you could give them? Because mental health awareness it's real out here, you know. It's
real, and especially with the whole COVID thing and you know, people being isolated, it's definitely elevated, and yeah, it sucks. I mean, this generation, I honestly feel really bad for them, because they are of the technology era where, you know, I think that there's a lack of social physical interaction with people, developing real connections and real relationships. You know, everything is very superficial. Everything is online. Can't touch, feel, see people's reactions sometimes, you know, and then especially with the females, you know, you don't ever get a real clear, honest representation. You know, people are, what do they call that? You know, there's filters and, you know,
front for the gram, as we mentioned earlier.
Front for the gram, you know, there's angles, and people think, oh my God, this person has this or looks like this, and a lot of that stuff is not true.
And some people are really not happy, and at the end of the day, I think we need to learn to just try to find ourselves, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Some people are just really, you know, like I mentioned openly, dealing with depression and anxiety, you know, it's a daily challenge, especially if you deal with any type of loss.
Yeah.
It's it kind of unfolds even more, you know,
and manifests in physical ways too.
We mentioned about that, about
for sure,
you know, when it comes to weight gain or loss, but
hair loss, all types of things. My brother passed away. I lost 30 pounds. I was so hurt. My hair fell out. You know, a lot happened physically to me. I was just drained, mentally drained. But my advice to this generation would be to seek resources. I mean, look, the online could be used as a tool, right? Just like a hammer, it could be used as a weapon. It could be used as a tool, right? So same thing with the internet. You could use it as a tool. You could use it as a weapon. You know, a lot of this, brainless scrolling and things like that, it's not going to help you get ahead. But one thing that I do is like on YouTube, I watch like positive affirmation videos, and it might sound cheesy, but like I'll even go to sleep listening to them. And it just says things like, I was born to be prosperous. I wish for abundance in my life, and things like that. And I have been listening to them for years, and I'm telling you, like, it's just a part of like my DNA now. Like, I'm just always like, I'm looking for abundance. Where is it? Right. So, and I see abundance in everything, and anything and everything. I see abundance. So, every time I had another opportunity come to my lap, I'm like, I see the vision. I see it. Yeah.
But see, it all starts with a thought, and then that goes back to like mental health, that we have to learn to like control our thoughts.
Control it.
Yeah, because when you have like the positive thoughts and stuff, things positive that is going to happen in your life. But what you coming from a church background, it goes back to like the scripture, like life and death is in the power of the tongue, and what you speak, you eat the fruits of it.
Absolutely.
So
I don't exactly have a church background. I mean, my family does.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I didn't grow up in a church. No, I didn't grow up in a church.
I'm sorry.
But I do know some of the Bible, because my fiance, he actually reads the Bible to me all the time, which is part of like my attraction to him. It's been like, hey, where have you been?
Right? Like he's a man of God.
Yeah, he's a man of God. He makes me and my son pray every night before we eat dinner. It's like, okay, this is cool.
This is different. This is a good thing.
Definitely something that I was missing.
Exactly.
So the piece of me I was missing.
But see, that's good, because like, not to get like all, because not everyone understands like spirituality, but I'll just say like believing in something and believing in God and having that structure, I think is just something beautiful, because I think sometimes we are in this world just thinking that it's because of what we did, and that, people still believe stuff like that. Yeah. But I think it's so good when you have some kind of spirituality going on.
You know what? I hear people say all the time, like, so I am a believer that we are given free will, and a lot of the choices that we make in life determine the outcome of our lives and sort of the trajectory and where we are today.
Oh, absolutely.
But there is an element of spiritual. First of all, how could you not be amazed by, first of all, like, what are you? What are we? You know what I mean? Where are we? You look up in the sky and you're like, what is that? How could you not be amazed that the branches of a tree are resemble, the branches of our lungs? How could you not be mind-boggled at the fact that the pattern of a leaf is the pattern on our palms, right? We are so intertwined and so connected to this world and this earth, and people take that for granted. They overlook it. And if you think about just how, the trees give us air and we give them air, and or, carbon monoxide, whatever the case is, it's all so perfect. How could you think that you're bigger than that?
That's so profound.
How could you think that you're in control? It's insanity to think that. And if you think that, good luck to you.
Exactly. But, you see how far you go.
Yeah, no. I can tell you now, just, speaking from experience, my journey has been, I would say, maybe 50%, busting my ass, and 50% divine intervention. Being able to read the signs. They're everywhere.
Yeah, good and bad.
Good and bad, right. Don't go that way,
Exactly.
Okay. But if you are not conscious of it and you're not aware of it, it'll go over your head every time, and you'll keep bumping your head.
Repeating the same pattern.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm in a place in my life where I have. It's almost like a skill you have to develop too. You have to learn how to see the signs. People will say, it's the triple numbers on a clock, or maybe a whisper, or just a coincidence, or a license plate, right? If you learn how to read the signs and they're all around us, it helps you navigate. It really does. And
you got to write a book, Jasmine.
No, thank you. No, I
think you should.
I can't take credit. I really can't take credit for half of it, because I just learned how to work within the system. And I don't mean this society system. I mean the system that we're born in, the supernatural, whatever you want to call it, religious, spiritual system. You learn how to live within it, and then you just have like a constant peace about your life. And you can kind of wake up and say, okay, what is it that I'm supposed to do today? And you'll get the answer if you ask. So, and that's where I'm at today. It's like, which way am I supposed to go? I can't even, I got the news the other day that the opening of my daycare center is going to be delayed. My second daycare center. because now that I've understood the system and how to run a daycare, 4 years of bumping my head, now I'm like, well, I want to own every daycare center in Brooklyn. Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I'm opening up a second one. And I got the news just recently, last week, that the center opening was going to be delayed. And, in the past, I might have been fuming about that. Like, what do you mean? But I was like, you know what?
It's a reason behind it.
It was supposed to happen. So however it's supposed to happen. And you know what? You know what's ironic about that? Today, so I was at the daycare center today, and my education director, which is a position at the daycare center, which is required to have a daycare center, she told me that she's retiring and moving to Pennsylvania. Now, had I opened a second, so she was supposed to help me open the second daycare center. But she added in her plans that she was going to retire. She just couldn't think of the right time to tell me. And I was like, now, had I been opening that second daycare center, do you know how tough that would have been without her? But now it's going to be delayed a few months. Guess what? I have the time to find someone else, train someone else in my culture and how I like to do things in my businesses. I have time to have my baby, to get back on my feet, to lose the weight, to breastfeed. So it's like
a blessing in disguise.
Everything is.
That's a great point.
Everything is. Even the toughest stuff, even the stuff that I could never explain the passing of my brother. Never, right? And at the time I used to, I had called a friend of mine who I knew was very much into the Bible. And I was just like, why? And he was like, in time, God reveals himself, and you just have to kind of trust that everything is happening exactly the way it should be. And that's just how I live my life, period.
Exactly. Even when it hurts, sometimes I'll never forget, a lot of pastors saying this, that sometimes we develop our purpose in pain.
Absolutely. And I did.
Yeah.
Living proof.
Exactly.
Started wall ball in my pain. And that was, I mean, looking back, it was a great distraction from my grief. But then I found my purpose in helping other kids. I really found satisfaction in, I'm telling you, the amount of kids that will come to me and say, your tournament saved my life. Because I had one kid, and I'll never forget, his name is Charlie, and he told me, and I was in the Bronx, and he told me, there's a gang that's been after me that wants me to join. And I always say, I don't have time because I'm always either training for your tournaments or I'm in your tournaments. And then he said, last week when I was playing, a few of those members got shot and killed. And he said, and had I gone that route, I would have been right with them. And he was like, wall ball saved my life.
Woo.
You know how many times I've heard that kids have said, you're just being here, I'm away from trouble, I feel safe. And I'm very big, especially my tournaments, and sportsmanship and camaraderie, and making sure that these kids come to the tournament and not just to play handball, but also have a safe haven. Huge on that. I don't let them curse at each other. I don't let them disrespect. If I ever see, the competition is supposed to get heated. Like I said, I'm a martial artist. We get heated, but at the same time, you have to have respect for your opponent, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something that I teach them all the time. And if I ever see it, even slightly leaning towards they're getting aggressive with each other, I stop the game and I make them shake hands. And then they have to talk in order for them to keep playing. Or I disqualify both of them, and that's it, they go home. And nobody wants to go home.
And then they learn from that.
Yeah,
they learn.
Yeah, and I've even been told that, there were two, I just use the Bloods and the Crips as an example, but I don't know the names of these things anymore. And, they were I'm from this gang and I'm from this gang. And they were forced to play against each other one time. But because they knew my rules and they knew I wasn't going to tolerate anything, they were forced to get along. And they then wound up being friends afterwards. Yeah, playing each other in handball. So very big on making sure that when my kids come to my tournaments that there's a safe haven. And
absolutely.
I can't tell you that the purpose that I found in that is so fulfilling. And I always say, thank you to my brother just for putting me on the path of being able to serve and give back and change lives, and so pain and purpose, or purpose and pain. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you definitely found it. Yes, because look what happened to your brother, and you, rather than, questioning everything, you was like, you know what? I want to do something to honor his legacy.
Yep.
And now you have wall ball and it saves so many lives.
Yeah.
And I know your brother would be so proud of you. So proud of you.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And I want to quickly go back to the culture pivot. I found it very interesting and I'm like, especially us as Black people, I know you half Black, and a lot of us be like, CP time, color people time, Black people time. We always make excuses.
Yeah.
And when you said that Black people time is broke people time, I found that so interesting. And I want to play the video where you actually explain about Black people time is broke people time.
Sure.
This year's NACPT Summit, we'd like to recognize those individuals who made significant contributions to our cause. Now, CPT, or Color People's Time, hey, Harry, how you doing, man? Is a long-standing tradition in the Black community that's been maintained for hundreds of years. A fine system that encourages tardiness and places no strong value on punctuality.
I just want to definitely get to the part where she mentions about Black people time is broke people's time, and when she explains it.
Yeah, because it's long. I think this chapter is long. Speaking to
so you could go through.
In this chapter.
Well, this is right where it is supposed to be, right?
We have this thing where if you're late, you say, Black people time. Black people time is broke people time. There's no such thing as Black people time, and relating that to being late. That is just an excuse. Get rid of that mentality of having an excuse for being late for everything.
Facts, though.
I come from Staten Island, so I'm going to use Staten Island as an example. It's like the oddest thing. Like, we have so much talent on Staten Island, but people still know of Staten Island as like Wu-Tang. And it's like, why haven't we had another representative since then, right? Everything from hair braiding to cutting hair, to fashion, manufacturing, all types of stuff. And my people cannot return an email or a phone call. I want to encourage you, when you work with someone, return a phone call on time. I literally received a $100,000 budget last year, and I wanted to partner with a guy from Staten Island who sold shirts. I put to the side $5,000 for him. I was just going to give it to him and say, design a uniform for us, for wall ball, for my next tournament or something. I put $5,000 aside in my budget, and I couldn't get the guy to return an email. If people say, hey, I have this money for you, follow up with a budget, with an invoice. Be aggressive. I'm known for following up with people constantly. If I don't hear from you within 24 hours, you're going to get a phone call from me. If you don't follow up with somebody, it doesn't matter how talented you are, you're going to kill your business.
That's real talk right there. Wow. And it's kind of like,
true.
I don't want to use the word instilled in me, but it's kind of like, I was so used to saying, like, okay, if we late, we fashionably late, it's CP time, but it is important about time management.
Yeah.
Could you speak on time management? Because I'm not even a mom, and I'd be stressed out with time management. How do you, what's some advice you can give to people that struggle with time management? Like, create a vision board, or
it's just psych yourself out. If you feel like, if you have to be somewhere at 5 and you're always late, turn your clock back, or it's funny because my fiance, he comes from, we come from the same place. We met when we were 11 years old, right? In 61. But he said the way he was raised is, him and his parents slept in until 12 o'clock, and they're always late to everything. And I was just like, that's so ghetto. Like, we're not doing that anymore, So, like, that's definitely, like, a point of contention in the relationship. It's so funny. But my mom, I recently told my mom, do you remember how she would say, we're out the door by 8 o'clock. And if you're not out the door, I'm leaving you. And she dead ass would leave me and my brother if we weren't out the door by 8 o'clock or 1 minute before. And there was a time where I remember I had a championship softball game. And she was like, if you're not out the door, and sure enough, she took off without me, and I was walking out the door, and she took. So, I grew up sort of like with that training of like, if you're not out the door. So I just take that very serious. I think that it's a reflection of who you are. And, I have a son. I'm pregnant, I have the businesses, but like it's important for me that if you say 4 o'clock, like I'm outside the door by 4 o'clock, you know, because I think it's a reflection of who you are. If you can't manage your time, then what else can't you manage? You know,
that's a great point.
Yeah, no. So psych yourself out, you know. If you got to be somewhere at 5, tell yourself you got to be there at 4. And if you're there early, great. You can scroll on your IG, you know, like
if you want
to, you know, you can do whatever you want, but also, you know, you should make sure that you're early, if not on time, because I can tell you now, especially in the daycare center, if I have an interview, if there's a teacher coming for a job, I don't care what the circumstances are. I really don't. Like, I don't care if the bus broke down. I don't care if there was a fire in the train station. If I say, like, your interview's at 11 a.m. and you walk through the doors at 11:01, you're not going to get the job. I'm not hiring you at all. I'm not even, I have
hardcore. That's
no.
though.
I've said, you know, like they would call me, my office is upstairs, and my assistant would call me and say, so-and-so was here, and I would say, send them home. I'm not even going to see them. I'm not even going to waste my time because they're showing me their ass now. I can't even imagine when they get the job, you know, how they're going to behave. So I was like, no, I wouldn't even consider it. So, you know, when you are late all the time, think about all the opportunities that you've missed.
That's true.
Think about all the people like me who are looking at that and saying, I don't even want to work with this person because I don't want to deal with that. I'm running a business. Especially in the daycare center, you have to always be mindful of a child to teacher ratio, you know. Depending on the age group, you have to have one teacher for every 6 kids or one teacher for every 4 kids, depending on the age. You know, the younger you are, the less of a group that you can have. And if the day starts and you have 7 kids in a classroom, but one teacher, you're out of compliance. That means if Department of Health or Department of Education walks through the door and they see 7 kids and one teacher, I'm going to get a ticket or I could be shut down. So, and I'm not going to let you ruin that for me. I've worked too hard. So I don't play those games.
That's good, though. And I see where that comes from. Your mom
play those games.
Instilling that in you as well.
Yeah. And that whole story that I gave on that portion of the course is true. Mm-hmm. There was a guy who has a clothing line on Staten Island that I just wanted to support. I didn't even need him. I didn't need him to design my shirt because I designed my own shirts and I would send them to my friend. But I said, you know what? And then my fiance, it was in front of my fiance, and I said, yeah, we'll support. And he was like, well, what's your clothing budget this year? And I was like $10,000. I'll give him half. So I literally was going to just write a check. And he was making all types of excuses of why he wasn't returning my emails. And I said, you know what? That means the shirts are going to be late and I'm not going to have them in time for my tournament. And then I have to think about marketing. I'm not doing that. I'm not working with him. Of course not. That's just, so he lost $5,000. And then he wound up telling my fiance, you know, he makes like $25,000 a year. So that would have been 1/5 of his whole budget. Right then and there, I would have just written the check and say, do what you do.
Exactly.
Ruin it. Just completely ruined it. But we never know the opportunities that are missed just because of our behavior like that.
Yeah, you know? Showing up late or not taking it seriously.
Yeah, no.
What's some advice that you could give to especially like young women, girls, you know, women in general about like getting themselves in order as far as being disciplined and, you know, either having your own business or really just reaching for the stars rather than having a mediocre life where you're living paycheck to paycheck? Yeah. Like what's some, because I could actually take this in consideration myself.
Here's what I would say. You have
I'm doing better with saving recently though.
Good. But yeah. Good. I remember our conversation. You have to first of all, one of the first things I would say is limit your investment and time and attention and energy into things that really don't matter, right? I'm sure you have people that you call friends. You got to think about, are they really your friends? Are they your associates? You know, when somebody calls your phone, and this is me, I tell people, don't call me, text me. Because if I have the time, I'm in my mindset. I don't want to be in your mindset. But if I want to be in your mindset, I'll pick up the phone. If I don't want to be in your mindset, just text me. I don't pick up the phone a lot, you know, because I'm always thinking, so limit things that are unnecessary. Do you have an unnecessary friend, quote unquote? You know, do you have an unnecessary bill, an unnecessary expense? Get rid of those things that really are not going to help you further your life. Period, right? You know how much that'll save you? What else? Boys, listen. I am a big believer.
I could do it all over again, but go on.
No, listen. I'm a big believer in you got to kiss a lot of frogs, right? Before you find your prince. Fine, great. I did it. We all got to do it, right? Or else you're not going to know your type, right? And then you're going to wind up settling for something that you think is your type, and then when you get older, you're like, wait, I really don't even like you. So, but limit your interaction. Like if you feel like you.
My problem was I was investing more in that person and their dream, than they were.
No, I don't do it. Say, here's another thing. You have to be. If you're in my life, and this is vice versa, you have to be an asset to me. I don't care who it is, family, friends, associates. You have to be an asset to me, and I'm absolutely going to be an asset to you. If I know you need a job, guess what? I have so many contacts. I'm going to pick up the phone for you. I'm going to find somebody that can hire you. I'm going to help you get there. Like if I take you serious, if you're a friend, if you're a family member that I feel like you take yourself serious, I'm going to be an asset to you. And I'm going to do whatever. And then like I have so many friends, like my friend was like, woke up one day, was like, I'm a designer. I like to do homes. And I was great. I'll hire you. I gave her $2,000. Come help me do my house. I bought a house in Pennsylvania and she came and she decorated my whole house, so same thing. I'm going to be an asset to you, but get rid of things that are liabilities.
Exactly.
And liabilities are not just finances. Liabilities can be people. Get rid of that liability. If that person is not, and I'm sorry, that could be your mother, your father, your sister, your brother. If they are chaos and they're not contributing to the progression of your life, you can love them from afar. Period. I don't care who it is. I'm just very black and white in that sense. I don't like chaotic people. I don't like people that bring drama to my life. I don't like picking up the phone for somebody to say, hey, girl, what you doing? Girl, you better get busy. And
it worked.
You better get busy. And I'll see you on the weekend. Like, Don't call me on a Tuesday like, what you doing? No, I'll see you on Saturday. So, I don't do those things. So anything unnecessary, anything that is a liability in your life, let it go. And then you will be so surprised how much time you have on your hands to do more productive things for yourself.
That's some awesome advice.
That's my advice.
Definitely.
And it's tough because you love people, right? But sometimes you gotta love people from afar.
This is true.
Yeah.
And I think with me, I'm so giving. Like, I don't know. It's just like my nature. I'm like so giving. So
listen, if you are too giving, you are going to
be taken advantage of.
You'd be taken advantage of, but also, how much could you possibly give if you
not giving much to yourself, right?
To yourself. It's I call it the airplane theory. They say put your mask on first, then help the person beside you. That's because what good are you to the next person if you can't breathe?
Great point.
Yeah.
And since unfortunately you got to wrap this up because I'm loving the conversation. I do want to mention two things about, all right, you mentioned about martial arts, but you were recognized as one of Brooklyn's top women in business, El Diario's most influential Latinas, New York City One News, you were New Yorker for the week,
yes,
as well as in CNN Women of the Week.
Yeah.
What does those accolades mean to you?
To me? So I don't want to sound like I'm not appreciative of the recognition, because I am, but I you know what, I mean, it's flattering. I don't know.
But see, that's beautiful though, Jasmine, because that just shows the humility about yourself. And then that's why you're going to continue to go far when people are so caught up in names and things.
Yeah,
I feel it limits, where they're going to go. And, Swiss Beats, one of the producers, that a lot of people know, he always says sky isn't the limit. It's just the view.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're a living witness of that right now. Like, you making things happen.
You know what? Like I said, I'm flattered. Those things are great. And some people do care about titles. I think at the end of the day, we are made up of dirt and dust, and we'll be here for, 100 years time. Or less. And then we're gone. So, and those things are not going to mean anything. It's going to be the impact that you've had in somebody else's life. So the titles are flattering. They're great. I really do appreciate them. But for me, it's, is somebody going to remember me when I'm gone? And that's what matters to me.
Basically your legacy.
My legacy. What's my legacy?
And 2 things. Success means to me.
Being able to do what I want with my time.
Good. I like that. And happiness is
peace, nature, my son, eventually my daughter. Happiness is, same answer as success. It's being able to wake up and say, you know what? I feel like having a me day. And a me day to me could mean the spa, or it could mean a quiet room with a book. I feel like I just have the flexibility to do what I want with my time. I don't have to answer to anybody. I don't have to rush to get out of bed to get to my 9 to 5. Even though I still have incredibly long work days, I choose the natural flow of my life right now. And if that means getting on a plane and going to China because I just want to get out of the States, then I'll do that. I have the means to do it. I have the time to do it. I have the flexibility. And that to me is success. That to me is happiness. It's just being able to do what I want when I want with my time.
Which is equivalent to freedom.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's the word. It's freedom. It's genuine freedom. I know that the term freedom could be so controversial too, because, our people, especially, they have this narrative that we're oppressed, and I get it to a certain extent. Absolutely. I've definitely faced a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have, or I wouldn't have had I been a different hue, right? If I didn't have so much melanin, it probably would have been a lot easier for me, but I don't use excuses. And under this system, people would say, yeah, you're never really free. I feel free.
That's a beautiful feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a beautiful feeling.
It's beautiful.
I'm working my way to that.
Yeah. Anybody could get there. Listen, I never graduated from college. I didn't finish. I went all the way to my senior year and decided I really hate math. So I'm not even going to stress myself. Yeah. So it's like, I'm not going to stress myself out doing this, and I didn't come from, I didn't grow up with the silver spoon. So, I busted my ass, and there's nothing special about me. It's just fortitude and resiliency and tenacity.
And your mindset.
And that's it. It really is the mindset. And that's what the course on the Culture Pivot is about. It's about changing your mentality. And I genuinely believe that anybody could do it.
Absolutely.
Anybody.
Absolutely.
It's got to be disciplined.
Yes, I agree. Well, I loved having you here.
Thank you so much.
As my first guest here at the podcast, Victory and Vanity.
I set the standard.
Yes, you did. You did. So whoever comes next, they got to come with it. They got to come with it. So thank you so much for being here, Jasmine.
Thank you for having me.
Jasmine Ray. And just plug in your social media real quick.
It's Jasmine, JASMINE _ Staten Island. And you could find me on IG and Facebook.
Okay, and then you got your website and everything up there.
The websites are literally the business names, with the exception of the U.S. Wallball Association is uswallball.org. Cornerstone Daycare Center is cornerstonedaycarecenter.org. Wallball World is wallballworld.com. And the Culture Pivot is theculturepivot.com.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We out.